why do you feel so anxious? And how can you feel good instead? I will explain you my experience in this video because as a child I experienced crippling anxiety every single week and I had no idea why. And maybe you know that feeling when fear seems to control your life and you don't even understand where it's coming from. Now, after spending over 15 years in the financial industry helping people build wealth, I realized something crucial. The biggest thing stopping people from creating the life they want isn't lack of knowledge or opportunity. It's fear. Fear of failure, fear of success, fear of not being good enough. And after completely transforming my own relationship with anxiety, I discovered something that will blow your mind. Most of the fears you are carrying right now aren't even yours. And in this video, I'm going to share my personal story of how I discovered where my childhood anxiety really came from. And then I will give you the exact 3-step framework I use personally to get rid of fears once and for all. And therefore, this happened. I was sitting on my bed on a Sunday evening when I was around 8 years old or something like that, staring at my little watch on my wrist, and maybe you know that feeling when time seems to move in slow motion because you are dreading for what's coming next, right? I was counting the hours. Okay, it's 6 p.m. now, and that means I have to go to sleep in a few hours. And then tomorrow morning, I have to go to school. And then this wave of anxiety would wash over me. This knot would form in my stomach, getting tighter and tighter. I felt like I wanted to cry. I felt nervous. I felt unsafe. I didn't want to go to school the next day. But here's the strange part. There was absolutely no reason for me to feel this bad. I wasn't being bullied. There was nothing wrong at school. And once I actually got to school, I was completely fine because I had a great time with my friends, enjoyed my classes, no problems at all. But every single Sunday evening, that same paralyzing fear would take over my entire body. This feeling kept getting worse and worse as I get older. Every Sunday became this nightmare of anxiety about Monday morning. And honestly, I never understood it as a child. Until a few years ago when I discovered something that completely blew my mind. It turns out that those fears weren't even mine. Because I came across this concept in the book Reality Transurfing about pendulums. Now, pendulums are energy structures that capture people in destructive patterns, like the pendulums of working hard, or the pendulum pushing yourself over the edge, feeling overwhelmed and stressed about responsibilities. And this pendulum had caught my father completely. And somehow it caught me too. So I thought to myself, how is this even possible? Well, pendulums are always looking to capture more people to feed off their energy. And children are especially vulnerable because we are so energetically open and naturally tune into our parents' emotional states. So when you are living in the same house with someone who is caught up in this pendulum, you can easily get pulled into the same energy pattern, even when a situation has nothing to do with our own life. So you have to be aware of this. And then suddenly everything clicked for me at that moment. You see, my father was incredibly overwhelmed from work. Too much work on his plate, too much responsibility. And every Sunday evening, he would start looking at his watch, breaking out in cold sweats, having panic attacks because he dreaded going back to work on Monday morning. And that feeling of having to do something you don't want to do, that fear of the fear itself. So can you imagine that you pick up the fear of someone else? So I was carrying around my father's work anxiety about Monday mornings, even though I was just a kid going to school. And here's what I realized. Most of the fears that are controlling your life right now probably aren't even yours either. They are pendulums you have caught up with from your parents, your environment, your society. Fears that have been around, fears that have been programmed into you that have nothing to do with your reality. And maybe you recognize one of those patterns in your life. You wake up thinking, what if I never find someone who truly loves me? What if I'm not smart enough to succeed in my business? Or, for example, what if I run out of money and end up broke and alone when I retire? And that's exactly why you want to know how to handle those fears. Fear is just an illusion. And if you think about it, fear isn't even real, right? But it can trap you for a long time. So this is what I started to do. And this is a concept of Tim Ferriss, the author of the book 4-Hour Workweek. I started to invite the fear, to look it directly in the eyes. And then something magical happened. The fear started to shrink. So let me tell you about my 3-step framework I use for myself to transform your relationship with fear forever. And you will keep moments that you are fearful, but it are only thoughts. And when you use the 3-step framework, it will help you forever. So step number 1, invite the fear into your life. Instead of trying to push it away, actually welcome it. And this alone will completely change your feeling, the dynamic, because you are now no longer the victim of your fear. You are now the observer of it. Most people are terrified of their fear. But when you invite the fear and look it in the eyes, look it closely, you realize it's just a thought that triggers certain feelings in your body. Nothing more than that. And that's totally okay. When you do that, then you have step number 2. Feel the fear and locate it where it's in your body. Because fear is literally a physical reaction designed to keep you safe. But that feeling gets stored somewhere in your body. Maybe it's the tension in your chest, a knot in your stomach, tightness in your throat. And instead of trying to make it go away, actually feel where it lives in your body. Because when you locate your fear physically, you realize it's not just that big scary monster anymore. It's just a sensation in your body. And then we go into step number 3. Step number 3 is stay with your fear and talk to it. This is where the magic happens. Stay with that feeling. Welcome it completely. Talk to your fear like it's a scary child. Hello fear, I hope you are doing well. I get that you are anxious and worried, and I'm going to give you a hug. I'm going to welcome you. When you concentrate on that feeling in your body and completely invite it to stay with you instead of trying to make it go away. When you do this, the fear starts to move and shift. It begins to dissolve because you are no longer feeding it with resistance. And here's what happens, what my experience is what happens when you start doing this consistently. You realize that most of your fears were never about the present moment. They are all about the imaginary future, the past traumas you had. Or like in my case, they weren't even my fears to begin with. That 8-year-old version of me spent years carrying around with Sunday evening anxiety that I picked up from my dad. And once I realized this wasn't even my fear, I could finally let it go. And then I finally felt safe again. And that was a great feeling, you can imagine. So ask yourself, which fears are you carrying around that maybe don't even belong to you? What pendulums do you have caught up in that are keeping you small and stuck? The moment you start talking to it with compassion instead of trying to fight it, that's when you discover something incredible will happen. You are not afraid of the fear anymore. And when you are not afraid of the fear anymore, that's literally nothing that can stop you from creating the life you actually want. Your fears don't have to control you anymore. So it's time to look your fears in the eyes, right? And reclaim your power. Reclaim your energy. So keep up the good work and remember, most of those fears are just pendulums you got caught up in. Love you guys and see you in the next video.